And here we are. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Get the Mic. Podcast episode number 15. Today we are reviewing the episode Look Out for Launch in Dragon Ball. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And just to review, everyone, the Get the Mic podcast is the podcast where we go over the mythological significance of individual episodes, dissecting them in the highest resolution we possibly can in order to delve out their true meaning.
True meaning. The mythological meaning.
True. And so today we're going to be talking about launch, or lunch, as you can see on the screen. Going forward, I know we missed a stream last week. Just want to cover some housekeeping stuff real quick, Brok. We're going to be trying to continue to stream on Sundays and continuing to release videos on Tuesdays. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. So far, that looks like it's going to be pretty consistent, so.
All right, just making sure on that. Also, in the near future, we're going to try and start making more of those produced videos accessible more times a week, possibly twice a week.
Yeah, we just have to get ahead of the curve on the recording on it.
Well, yeah, we have to get ahead of the... Well, that's the thing. Do we want to do... Never mind. We'll talk about that later. Point is, more content's coming your way. If you like what you see on this channel, please subscribe so that you can make sure you see that coming in the future. Going forward here, we have our title screen, The Peculiar Girl Lunch, and this episode is going to begin with Goku and Krillin traveling to find a gal for Master Roshi to be sufficient for his training. Now, we've talked a little bit about that, but is there any further thought that you have about Master Roshi's request for the boys to have a woman present while the training is being conducted?
I think it's a recognition, in part, that that for the best type of training Roshi can imagine, it requires a regular set of parents and also a super father, and that Roshi can't fulfill his role for them as just a father figure. He needs, or as just a single parent figure even, that he needs to actually fulfill that archetypal progression for him. And so the onus is to create that for Goku and Krillin now, as that's the best way he knows to train them up for the world,
I also think it's particular how he addresses it, and we're going to get into that part of the episode. But the manner in which he addresses that need is poignant. But yeah, so we have the Peculiar Girl Lunch, and she is a little peculiar, but that is because she's an archetype.
Right. She is right on the edge of that sort of space where you see sort of the more generalized representation of something kind of crystallizing there with what Launch is representing here.
What do you think about the differences between the Japanese title and the American title?
I think the Japanese is Look Out for Launch. Look Out for Launch.
Well, this is the Japanese.
Oh, is it the English that's Look Out for Launch?
Yes.
Yeah. So the English is Look Out for Launch. The Peculiar Girl Lunch, I think, just is also pointing out that the balance that you're seeing in Launch is not normal. Like it's emphasizing that this is sort of the 1 in a million representation of something, or sort of like the how would you put it? Well, she's able to ride the Nimbus.
Blue Launch.
Yes.
We don't know about Blonde Launch, but we'll see.
Right.
So the episode begins here in the Wild West. I think it's particular, but I'll let you go ahead because I have an analysis of this, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, the first thing that stands out about this is that they're in the desert again. So this is another desert representation in the show, sort of shown as an introduction to a character. I think it's exactly a reflection of Yamcha, to be specific, because thinking about, blonde launch and what she's representing, her embodiment is very similar to Yamcha's embodiment. And we'll see those parallels moving forward. So I think part of why we're starting out here at a desert saloon, specifically, it's a mirroring of Yamcha's story.
I'm interested to hear your parallel between the two of them.
Yep.
But I also think that it's the Wild West for a reason. Is it a very lawful land?
Oh, no.
Would you say it's pretty chaotic?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Spawned in the chaos, right? She's an embodiment of chaos. Anytime, and we'll get into this, but anytime Launch finds herself in a situation in which chaos beckons, she can transition into that more chaotic embodiment she has accessible to her.
Chaotic. It's an interesting way of putting it.
Well, we'll see. I don't want to jump the lead. What is it called?
Jump the gun?
Yeah, jump the gun. There we go. But yeah, so in the episode here, we are in a saloon where some bounty hunters are trying to hunt Launch. Blonde Launch here because she's known for robbing trains and things like that.
She is most wanted. It shows
wanted. More than
of
Akira.
All these different little representations, and she's all the way up.
Yeah, Akira's the first one, the author.
Mm-hmm.
He's wanted, but he's already been found out. It's funny. Very, very tongue in cheek.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff in Dragon Ball that way.
Yeah. And so we also thought this was a suitable picture.
Yeah, I think this is a good representation of our setup here, because in this saloon in the desert, we see that she's the most wanted and that she's being hunted by the people who are there. It's like, boom. That shows us the exact situation that we're about to start having played out, right? So this guy's like, yeah, I'm in it for the reward, right? And some of his cohorts are talking about, oh, she's so dangerous. And, there's sort of talking around the room about how dangerous she is. Heard she was in the next town over, and it's sort of like she's the super intimidating figure to them.
Yeah, for the most part. And the main bounty hunter says that the day that he's bested by a lone woman be the day he gives up.
Yes.
And so then in walks
Blanche.
not Launch.
Blue Launch.
Launch, but Blanche. Well, I guess it's Blanche either way.
Yeah. It's Blanche and Blanche.
Anyways, yeah, so Blue Launch comes in. Not very intimidating. Did you want to say any more about Blue Launch's first?
Just that she doesn't appear to them the way that she could be. She appears sort of in this totally innocuous inception that is what Launch is as an incarnation here is just wholly good and innocent. So she could walk, similar to how Goku could just walk into a room of dangerous people and not think anything of it, in the way that, let's say, the axe didn't crack over his head whenever he broke into that house in the village with good intentions, in the same way, right? So Launch being sort of in this state of just like, oh, this is just a place to come in and get something to drink, and doesn't think about how rough it is. I think that just completely shatters their, illusions of who she could be.
We can also assume that she just sneezed because she says she doesn't know where she is, which is another reason why I was pointing out the chaotic earlier and why it's the Wild Wild West, because she's found herself in that chaos, right? After having, let's say, perpetrated these acts as Blonde Launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she is. It's almost sort of like a meta story of just like if you were living that life in the Wild West, what your progression would be like. Like you would find yourself like, how did I end up in this much, turmoil or whatever, just in the concept of things being chaotic.
Well, also that, what I mean by that is Blue Launch having been, let's say, possessed by what blonde launch represents for so long, because she's obviously been on a pretty long spree here, right?
Right.
It's led blue launch to be so lost in the chaos that she don't even know where she is, which is why she's in the Wild West, in the desert, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So the main bounty hunter says that he has a weakness for girls of her type, which is funny given what he had just said, right?
Yeah. It's actually hilarious. It's ironic, and, Toriyama's already setting it up.
Yeah, this is pointing out why it is that he could be bested by a girl like
It
her.
also is commentary on that loner, like, bounty hunter archetype, right?
Oh, yeah.
And how it pales in comparison to even just a more grounded embodiment of femininity that's an actual ideal.
Right. So yeah, we see that it's almost like a slip. He says he has a weakness for girls of her type, and trying to flirt with her, and she's just, she's launch. She's basically doesn't understand. She doesn't necessarily voice that she doesn't understand, but she's completely unfazed by anyone's advances. We see that starting out right here.
Unfazed, I think, though, it's
at least on this representation, right? Because to say she as a whole is unfazed isn't true, because we can get into the psychological ramifications of what's happening with blonde.
But we'll have a lot to talk about on her, let's say, reactions. But yeah, I mean, she's generally unfazed because of her naivete, right? I'm so glad you got this picture, because I got another one later.
Great.
It's the exact same thing.
Well, when he starts trying to flirt with her is when she sneezes. So the timing of Launch's sneezes, I think, it's obvious that this is going to be important moving through the episode.
Oh, yes, of course.
Because
it's important basically almost every time she sneezes.
Yeah. She sneezes when it serves her, right? Now, I want to point out what a sneeze is here, symbolically, right? A sneeze is the body taking over to do something that your logical brain, your logos, isn't really thinking about.
Right, the loss of control.
Right, it's the brain in your body, right? The unconscious part of your brain knows when you need to do these things because the body's communicating with itself. And so this is also an unconscious...
It's almost a primordial actor summoning forth that part of you that needs to confront what is in front of you.
Right, now this is what Jung would talk about as an animus possession, right? Whenever that persona in the unconscious that is masculine in a woman seems to step into the control room, so to speak. And it's the same thing as the anima possession for a man. Now, however much you agree with Jungian psychology, it's really interested because they're kind of rooted in this same idea, right? That there's an unconscious sort of flip side. And we've started seeing that Jungian pattern with, let's say, Bulma and Oolong, and then Yamcha and Puar, right? Now we take the ideas together, and that's why I love that alchemical symbolism that we're bringing to myth and meaning, because you think about the half masculine, half feminine entity, right? That is standing there on that alchemical rebus picture, right? So now that we've approached the microcosm of the masculine, microcosm of the feminine, now it's like a microcosm of masculinity and femininity switched on and off, right? On one being. So I really like to see that because it's a progression of these same symbolic things that are happening too.
So that's interesting. Your analysis of Launch is that she's both masculine and feminine.
Yeah, there's a duality to her. It's almost an inversion in the way that it would normally be portrayed, and I think that is something that Toriyama is trying to say about the role of that for Goku and Krillin, right?
And then I would say we're gonna have to hash something out, because I don't agree with that. I think that Blonde Launch is the adversarial possession of the naive feminine form, meaning, right, the separation too between the two and how they're unconscious of each other's action is poignant, because innocent Launch has obviously been sheltered to the point where she hasn't been exposed to the malevolence of the world. Blonde Launch is the persona she's enabled to embody that by accepting the, let's say, possession of the adversarial, meaning the adversary, like the spirit of the adversary, Lucifer, right? Not necessarily saying the unholy trinity or anything, but that which goes against.
So you're talking about agreeableness versus disagreeableness.
Right, but to function in the world, the natural reaction of innocent Launch is to create a persona there, unless, and that she's unconscious of it is
so that she can
the
maintain.
next step.
Well, I don't want to just say stasis. I guess stasis is one way to put it, but to maintain the state that she's in, by which she would be able to say, ride the Nimbus.
Well, it's also, yeah, exactly, and that's, she has to be unconscious for that to happen.
Yes.
But I would say that over time, and we're going to see that over time, Blonde Launch actually becomes the dominant persona between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because Blonde Launch being reined in is easier than Blue Launch being exposed to the hardship, because Blue Launch is completely oblivious to it. It's like Sleeping Beauty.
Right.
And so my interpretation of those two launches is, I think, different than yours. I don't think, and no, I'm not saying there's not masculine traits in Blonde Launch, but by my figure, I don't see, because she does still represent femininity.
Yes.
But she's just the adversarial, that which goes against in Launch, that is manifest.
As an animus.
Yeah.
The disagreeableness within the woman in her
Sure.
unconscious. Yeah. But the thing is that the reason that Blonde Launch being more present later is a good thing is because that is a level of animus integration. Right?
No,
and so
right,
as she
exactly.
integrates more and more of her shadow self aspect, right? The more that she becomes grounded as a character as well.
Yes.
So, but that is, and that's not to say that like masculinity is greater than femininity. We're kind of talking with limited language here around what the masculine and feminine really represent, right? But what's interesting to me about this is that this is also rooted in the episode where we're about to see conversation between Goku and Krillin about how Goku discerns people, right? Because of the way that he is. And so Launch being manifest as this flip-flopping masculine negative figure is a literal manifestation of Goku's coming to understand that as a concept. That's why I'm phrasing it in like masculine and feminine, because Goku is just now trying to learn what it means for someone to be feminine. Right, not to look feminine, because he's removed Bulma's panties.
Well,
and
he's
stuff,
understood.
But to be feminine.
Well, I don't think it's just to look feminine from removing Bulma's panties. I just think that what Toriyama is saying here is that there's more to femininity than just their vulnerability, which is what was really discovered by the removal of the panties, right? I just want to be clear on what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
But
let's say that Launch is the full spectrum of what it means to be feminine. Like this is like, full, just like the state that Launch is all the way as Blue Launch, all the way to like her being as aggressive as possible too. And what Toriyama is saying is that like the feminine archetype isn't just, the dainty Blue Launch. Goku's learning about what it means to be feminine through the full range.
No, I agree with you. But that's really where I was taking issue, and I think we're kind of on the same page.
I think we're technically going towards the same place.
I'm saying that Launch represents the fully feminine. And you were saying, I was thinking you were saying she's representing masculine, like a masculine spirit, more or less, with Blonde Launch, which I think can sometimes be the case, but more often than not, I think it's more of the feminine's adaptation of the spirit of the adversary, which is that accumulation of
that's
the
why
material.
I'm talking in limited terms, just calling it masculine, because there's a lot of ideas in masculinity that also are applicable to femininity that have gotten scrambled.
Right,
You know?
and I'm trying and disembody the gender from the spirit of the adversary, because I
Sure.
think that can take over both um, masculine and feminine spirits, and particularly, and I think that's why it has to be money that blonde launch accumulates, is particularly when it manifests in females, it is that accumulation of material things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happens to be the vice of that adversarial spirit.
Sure. Well, that's kind of the idea, because you think about the idea of, like, I think one person we listened to was talking about this the other day. This, like, the man should be the breadwinner or whatever, right? Oh, do we have an error? Oh, what's going on?
I'm just trying to see if we're still. Can you see if we're still streaming?
Yeah, I'm gonna pop in. Having technical difficulties if we are live right now.
Well, we had 2 viewers, then it dropped.
See what's going on if I pull it up.
So we had 1 viewer consistently. So
I think we're live. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, we'll continue then. I was just.
What was that mute though?
What mute?
Oh, I see. I see what you're going.
Okay, back to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Let's go on from here.
I just grabbed this as my image of the fight, because whenever she flops into her blonde launch persona, she just immediately starts wrecking everybody at the bar.
Right, because it is that spirit of the adversary, that which goes against, that is more powerful than the spirit of greed, which inhabits most of these bounty hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, I just love this, like, wily coyote ass guy. So she goes and lashes out at them for, well, really just being there. But her manifestation, of course, is a response to him hitting on her, right?
Well, also, I think, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's get into that.
Well, and that's why she manifests as an adversarial spirit, right? So that's what we were both kind of saying. So she comes out and just attacks all of them, because literally she's been summoned as a protector of Blue Launch.
It's almost like he is imposing his will, manipulating her. He's imposing his spirit upon her, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the natural reaction of Blue Launch, is to allow that to come. And we'll see that later iterated in this episode, cemented, let's say, about how it happens that she sneezes and when it does happen.
Right.
But yeah, it is important to know that it's when he is trying to take advantage of her. I would rather make that point, because it is her naivety that he is trying to exploit.
Right. Well, I also want to say that, like, you know, her lashing out and fighting and ultimately being, well, a bandit, right? The reason that I was likening that to Yamcha earlier is because of how Yamcha was trying to represent this very masculine ideal, and the way that he was doing that without integrating sort of his respect for the feminine, right, was to do that. And we see that in this next picture too. She's got a gun, and it reminds me of the you know, Yamcha using a gun all of one time whenever he's against Goku, and then throwing it on the ground, and the gun sort of representing this malice that comes with that. So I like that we're seeing sort of that representation.
I see what you mean.
So that's a piece of my masculine feminine dichotomy sort of analysis looking at this.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming at it from with Yamcha. My issue would be that Yamcha, like, knows he's not on the right path, for example, and that's kind of why he throws away the gun.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance,
this is just pure adversarial.
And she's been separated too. Like her blue path has been separated from her blonde path, mm-hmm. which is almost it's almost more separated than Oolong and
Yeah.
and Bluma.
Oolong and Bluma or Oolong. Yeah, I guess like
Or let's say Poir and
or
Yamcha.
Poor and Yamcha. I mean, you can look at Poor and Yamcha where this side of him is ruling him more than the maid Poir side, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's sort of how we see the balance in that character.
But here it's almost a complete balance.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And it has to be that way because like we were saying earlier, it is the full spectrum of femininity that I think that Krillin needs it more than Goku, but he also doesn't understand the lessons it's teaching when it actually happens, and we're gonna see that exact thing. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we switch over to the boys. She's obviously kicking ass in the saloon or whatever. Also, no strong female characters. They don't exist before 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here we see Frog getting peed upon. Who is peeing upon him? Krillin. Why'd you put this?
I like the symbology of the frog. And generally speaking, the idea of Krillin pissing upon the frog is basically like him pissing on his conscience. He's basically like, in this moment, by revealing himself in the way that he is pissing upon what frogs have represented symbologically. It's I just thought it was poignant, especially for the way that it's like he's just hopped off of Goku's back because he can't ride the Nimbus. So his pissing on his conscience is funny to me.
Oh, right. And I think, too, earlier, Goku says, stop thinking negative thoughts and you could ride on the Nimbus. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. And it's like he's actively choosing to be malicious. And here, that's the exact thing. This frog is totally innocent. It's just more characterization of the spirit of being that Krillin is inhabiting is one of malice and one of resentment. And it's really the first time we can see some of that stuff coming out from Krillin, because we don't see him like bully. He doesn't try to like bully Goku. But here, obviously, this frog is less powerful than him, and Krillin's going to exert his power over the frog to piss on top of its head.
And then we get the dynamic also reminding us yet again what someone using the bathroom means symbolically or symbolically, I should say, in Dragon Ball, where it's revealing your inadequacies or feeling exposed.
It's
right?
also releasing, let's say, your true self, because I mean here, in this instance, before possibly not. Well, you could make a case for it that the embarrassment that Oolong feels is really the, let's say, the mode of being he's living out.
Well, look at what happens in this scene. He's pissing on the frog. Goku walks up and comments to him that he's taking a long time. And he's embarrassed, right? Because what Goku has seen is he has revealed... Oh, I'm sure that picked up. He's revealed his mode of being, right? He's looked at him for the way that he's actually being, and he's embarrassed by it. And so there's that being reintegrated into the story.
It's the opposite of one of those rules that Dr. Peterson has: act so that you can tell the truth about how you act.
Yes.
Right. And he's being caught acting in a manner in which he would be embarrassed other people knowing how he's acting in that instance.
Exactly.
I like, and that's the thing. So I will say, for all you audience members, we watched the episode before we had the subtitles for this one. We have all the subtitles now, so this won't happen again. But some of these, it's the first time I'm seeing the actual subtitles for the dialogue presented.
Oh yeah, it's pretty great in Japanese. Basically, we're getting pulled back into the conversation about Goku's ability to discern, right? How he discerns male from female.
Well, there's more nuance to the discerning than women are more vulnerable than men.
Right.
Which is the first step.
Which is what we see starting off immediately with Dragon Ball.
Right. And we see, now with even the last couple of episodes, right? I guess just the last episode with Goku going out and getting gals for Master Roshi, we're seeing some more development of that discriminatory skill. And he even says in this episode, I just have to feel them about to know if they're a man or a woman or not, right? But he can actually verbalize it at this point as well, so he's come a long way.
Yeah, there's it looks like there's not a lot of progress, but we're really just getting started with Goku's character.
Then we have Launch. Her next target is this train. She decides to blow it up.
So we see the first thing that Launch does whenever she's given control again is to go and rob a train. Immediately goes into that state that you could say like Yamcha was in whenever we found him, right? Just stealing for material gain, being a bandit.
Yeah. Almost out of necessity, though, because think about it's Blonde Launch's reaction, whereas Yamcha did not have that same kind of reaction, is what I'm saying. Yamcha's conscious that he's a bandit.
Mm-hmm.
Part of Launch is not conscious that she's on the wrong path.
Oh, yeah.
And that's important. But, right, so the first thing that Blonde Launch does is go ahead and embody that spirit of personal material gain. Taking all the jewels and treasures, she robs the train, and the conductor or whoever this is calls the police. Lunch just showed up.
I just love the irony of this, right? Because part of the pun that Toriyama's put on this is like, she's lunch, she's prey, she's sort of like, and we see that with her. Immediately she's set up as like men treat her as prey. They're like, oh, I'll just go after her and start trying to soothe her and trying to woo her. And it's like, so this robbed train, and he's like, police, the lunch just showed up and ate all of our food.
Right, exactly.
So it's just great.
It's ironic. There's a good level of irony, especially in the whole design of the character. And Toriyama is so brilliant coming up with this character specifically being the one that needs to be with the boys when they train, too. That's the other thing. That's the bigger context.
Yeah, with the context of Krillin and what Krillin is for Goku, it makes so much more sense.
And what Krillin needs to grow and what Goku needs to learn about discrimination, let's say. Or discriminatory skill.
Which is great after the mention of lunch just got here. In Japanese, Krillin's trying to describe what about her is attractive whenever he sees her down there because she's being attacked. Or no, sorry, I'm getting this scene mixed up with the next one where they show up. He's describing the type of girl that Roshi wants, right? And he calls her like a peachy girl or whatever, and Goku says he doesn't know what he means. So he tries to liken it to Goku to something he would understand, and he says, if it were you, it's obviously that you'd prefer your fish springy, right? Is what kind of how he says it, peachy. It's like perky. You would prefer your fish perky, is what he says. And Goku turns around and says, then old timer's gonna eat her, right?
And then that's
more linked to this unconscious idea, right?
And it's also funny. That's obviously, let's say, in English, it's a double meaning there.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
There's like 4 different directions the joke goes.
Oh, I know. It's
so
hilarious.
Funny.
It's great.
But anyway, I just wanted to point out why, like, specifically he would go to fish to try to liken it for Goku, right?
Gotcha.
And she's also this, we're looking at like Blonde Launch as this unconscious manifestation of the adversary, right? And the conscious-unconscious dichotomy sort of thing.
Well, I think that's another reason, too, I want to point out why it has to be Launch is because if it was just Blue Launch coming to the island, Roshi would be able to take advantage of her such to the point where that would induce a toxic environment, especially if Roshi's able to live out those vices. but it's because Blonde Launch is part of her mode of being and can confront other modes of being which might threaten her, proves to be the reason why she's able to stay and be beneficial to the boys.
Yeah, it's almost like an image of the necessity of what Blonde Launch is, and they need to learn to respect that.
Right. And they do. So the cops are chasing Launch down. She's got all the money. And she sneezes. Wait. Okay, yeah. She sneezes.
Yeah, she just sneezes and immediately wrecks the bike. And so they surround her, and they're like, you know.
She's like, what do I do? Because she doesn't know. Because she's unconscious of the mode of being that she must adopt to exist in the harsh world that is real.
And the cops are offended that she would deny it. They're like, you know what you've done. Like,
you just did it. Like, yeah, I mean, it's akin to a kid having their hand in the cookie jar and being like, I don't know what's wrong.
yeah.
And so Blue Launch calls out for help, and who knows? We would look cool if we helped her. I didn't know that.
So there's this element of what I think partially is Krillin's representation for Goku, right? So I think that the Krillin Launch dynamic is all a reflection of Goku's self-conscious discernment of other people. And it's sort of this articulation of his integration.
Well, what do you think about this? Because Goku only meets Krillin after meeting Master Roshi. Master Roshi has similar vices and weaknesses to Krillin. It's almost as if Goku has manifested Krillin as an interpretation of what he could be if he had the same vices as Master Roshi.
Right. There's a very egoistic quality to Krillin's representation. You can say that as Goku is comparing other people to himself or comparing himself to other people, he is manifesting sort of this image, a shadow image almost, or like an ego-constructed image that is a negative. And it's not like wholly negative, right? But it's negative in the sense that that mode of being couldn't ride the Nimbus.
Right, and we'll see that as Goku's introduced to newer and newer ideas.
But thinking of it as an extension of Goku, though, it's almost like the inevitable ego that Goku has to have now that he has that sort of ability to discern people in the way that he's learning how to as well. And so, the failing nature of the ego. And that's why I think he's like, oh, it'd look cool if we would help her. And Goku's asking him if they should, and he's like, well, if we should, then we should.
Right, and if we should help her out, then let's help. Okay.
It's just funny that that's what he responds to specifically, as Krillin says, we would look cool if we helped her, but we're probably pretty much outmatched.
Yeah, and in the English he says, like, our chances aren't good.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting, because the first thing I put in was this, and the fact that because he's on the path, this has to be what he says here, that he's here to help that girl, he's here to save her, and Krillin runs away at first. He says, I respect you cops, you know, whatever. This is all Goku's idea.
Yeah, I love that Krillin is immediately just like, his response is, Goku has gotten me into a serious amount of trouble for questioning this sort of authority of the situation. And that's sort of the hero figure of Goku.
Which ultimately, it is true. I mean, Launch... But I think either way, this is an unjust situation. Launch being unconscious to her actions, it's not fair to hold her responsible for them.
Yeah.
It's kind of Goku coming in.
Well, he's coming in to save the spirit of the feminine. Right?
Well, that's what I was saying. It's not just him. It's the way coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Intersecting with the feminine nature of Launch and bailing her out because she is innocent, even though, let's say, Blonde Launch is not.
Right.
And so Goku smashes the police easily.
Just crushes
even though they have guns, it doesn't even matter. Smacks them because obviously his mode of being is tiers above working for pay, enforcing the authority of the state.
Yeah, he recognizes the pattern.
And they save her, and they go on the Nimbus. And this is the only other character so far that we've seen can ride the Nimbus besides Chi-Chi.
Right. So Launch is also pure of thought, but she's older than Chi-Chi, right? We can see that, in a sense, I think Blonde Launch is the manifestation of continually trying to keep that childlike innocence. That
blue.
Sorry, I keep saying blonde and blue backwards. So Blue Launch is the physical manifestation, right? Of a person like that. But Blonde Launch is the inevitability, what's created by trying to maintain that.
Right. It is the Sleeping Beauty, and then I guess the I don't know, Blonde Launch is an explanation further than that. Like, what happens to a person who willingly is unconscious to not only her own deeds, but the maliciousness of the world around her, right? In order for that to maintain, she has to have something to draw upon. And that could be, I don't want to say it's the tyrannical mother, because Blonde Launch is not the tyrannical mother.
No.
But she is the spirit of the adversary, and she is what is able to keep Launch around, which actually, I didn't expect to bring this up, but it reminds me of Gollum. Gollum is the spirit of the adversary that comes around to make sure that Smeagol stays around. Smeagol being someone who killed his own cousin and was so distraught by it, he had to keep it in his unconscious.
And then that sort of
same unconscious
persona, you could say, right? In a Jungian sense, even that persona stays there and warps.
But would you say Gollum is a feminine spirit instead of Smeagol?
That Gollum is a feminine spirit instead of Smeagol?
Under the animus possession we're going about, or the anima possession we're going about.
I don't think it's
Smeagol.
A 1-to-1 from like Launch to Gollum.
No, but I think the explanation of their dual personalities is the reason they both exist is because they're unwilling to confront the facts that are presented before them. Launch is unwilling to accept the fact that not only is the world a dangerous place for her to be in, but her own actions that are, let's say, motivated by the spirit of the adversary, same way that Smeagol is unable to accept his own deeds.
Right. Well, this is almost like, if you take the ideas and put them together, this is like Toriyama saying that, like, if you've got a Sleeping Beauty who's willfully sleeping, then she will manifest something out of almost like resentment, right? An adversarial spirit.
I don't think we're streaming. If you view, oh wait, one concurrent. It looks like we might be coming back.
My YouTube app, there it is. Well, let me double check again.
I don't think we're streaming. Okay,
So
I guess we
yeah,
totally
I guess
are.
we're streaming.
All right, sorry. Sorry. The last time I'll bring that up. But right, what I'm saying here is that she's only able to stay on the path because of her unconsciousness for now. And that Blonde Launch, actually, I would say Blonde Launch eventually would be able to ride the Nimbus, though we don't see it. But we'll get into that later on.
Okay, all right.
And then suddenly Krillin changes spots.
I love it. So Krillin is just like, he is totally, completely enamored with Launch, which is, I mean, that's why we know Roshi would be. Because as we kind of talked about, Krillin being a reflection of Roshi in that sense. Like a little Roshi for Goku.
Right, exactly. Bald and all.
Right. Since he is that, he knows, like, Roshi's going to love this girl.
Yeah, but I think it's funny that he grabs onto her because he prefers to have her, let's say, her motherly mode of being as something to cling on to than Goku's heroic mode of being. And it actually says something about Krillin and that being that nurturing encouragement has been missing from a lot of his life. And we haven't even heard his backstory yet, but we already know that because of the visual storytelling that Toriyama put into these panels.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just crazy how much we got into it even in season 1, where it was just like this one panel, like we can just sit there and talk about one panel for 10, 15 minutes sometimes.
Right. And so Krillin is not ready to respect the mode of being that is the hero yet. We're going to see later on how he grows. Obviously, many of you guys know. But let's go ahead and continue. It's Goku's ability to just have almost ultimate like humility. It's nothing is verboten for him, right? There's no etiquette. He'll say things how it is. And I wanted to put this particular one in because it's really the first impression that Launch has of Master Roshi. And it's not saying Launch is mature enough to know everybody uses the restroom, but Krillin and Goku aren't, and how they interact on it is funny about that, I think. Krillin says that he's using the restroom, and it's a nice way to say toilet, and this is what Goku responds with. They're two mode of beings, right? So you can see Krillin's mode of being, how he's acting differently around this woman, and Goku, who is acting no differently around her.
Right. And also, whenever you take the analog of using the bathroom, using the bathroom to as I guess I would put exposing vulnerability, or like they are currently vulnerable. They have vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
So Goku's like, oh, he's in his
He's
vulnerability
right
space.
now, right? Yeah.
I'm just gonna acknowledge it openly, and Krillin's like, don't do that, man.
Right. And it's actually Launch doesn't really care.
Yeah, and
she doesn't even know.
Launch is ambivalent.
She just is like everybody does that
because she's unconscious, right? She's not ego possessed.
Well, not only that, but she's an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so here, I wanted to put this because this is another thing where Krillin is admiring her, is basking in her.
Dude, this is the Tyler one meme.
Oh my god. Yeah, so he's somewhat lacking in splendor. I think that is that lacking in that enlightenment, that little that bit of beauty that is something to strive for. And that is specifically, I think, a motivator for Krillin throughout this first season of training and beyond, because who stays with Roshi, beyond the first tournament? Krillin and Launch, right?
Right.
And so, lacking in splendor, he obviously views Launch as beautiful, something worth striving for, and that little bit of beauty, when you bring it into your life, can change your world. And that's what it does for Krillin, especially. It actually, we'll talk about more of the effects on Krillin later, but Launch is a hugely influential character on both Krillin and Goku.
Not even just them. She's a hugely influential character even beyond them.
Well, yeah, I would say
great.
Roshi, but it sucks that she's pretty much forgotten. And we'll get into the reasons why I think she was forgotten. And I have some analysis on that. But let's continue. So,
this is great.
Krillin asks her, like, who are those bad guys that were after you? They obviously were not real policemen. She was like, yep, they're real policemen.
Yep, just policemen, real ones. They were trying to get me.
And so Krillin is aghast at this because of the nature that Launch has showed so far has not indicated any spirit of adversary or disagreeableness. And so even this lobster's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. It's like, excuse me?
Right. And I think that's why it's shown. And Krillin is pretty much, he doesn't know what to say. I just had to put this in his vulnerable state, right? This looks terrible, and Goku just, he is only driven by his immediate surroundings and how it doesn't smell good. So he doesn't care about the vulnerable moments of his.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to Goku.
So she's somewhat aware, and that's the thing. She is somewhat aware of what her other, quote unquote, other half does. but she's more or less absolved of it. She's absolved herself of the responsibility of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Because of her
she is,
unconscious.
she is able to have what she has right now because of it, right? But she has divorced herself from it.
Right, and that's kind of allowed her to. It's a negative thing, actually. I would argue. Oh, in the end, it becomes something positive because she's able to integrate Blonde Launch. But I would say it's a negative thing to be, let's say, absolvent of your responsibilities because of your naivety to the world.
Yes, it puts you in a state of unbalanced sort of
Chaos in the
disharmony.
desert.
Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting, too, because she needs Roshi and the boys as much as they need her. She kind of needs to integrate the shadow.
Well, she needs to integrate that masculine space, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what's coming about here. It's why she, particularly Blonde Launch, is prevalent in the first season around the masculine spirits of Goku, Krillin, and Master Roshi.
Mm-hmm. Incredible.
So Master Roshi sees her and he's overwhelmed. He doesn't stop grumbling and making Roshi sounds.
Oh, he sounds really
You
Roshi
know
in
him.
this
You
one.
know him. You love him. And he's looking. But I wanted to put this part for a reason, and it's because the gaze of Roshi here is, and we're gonna see this echoed later.
The blind gaze of Roshi.
It's totally blind, right?
Yeah.
It's beyond. It is in emblematic of what Launch is. Not at all. His gaze doesn't embody her at all. Maybe it shows her body, but it doesn't embody her, and that's the issue.
Right. This is the lens by which he sees the world, right?
Right, and I think too. Well, we'll get into it because there's another scene that I want to talk about that in. And so he comes in, and he's huge, and he yells, and he's so excited, and he
I think this is
startles
the
them
biggest
both.
Roshi head we've gotten so far.
It's as big as it's bigger than the window. Yeah, it's bigger than the window. Also, what do you think about this bottom tooth that's here?
That is a large tooth.
He's only 2 teeth. That's all he's got. And so they're startled by it. But I wanted to put this because it's his projection, right? He is overcome with this the vice that he's been seeking, and so it's a grotesque formation when he's finally able to act on it. And so here I wanted to put this because this is exactly the embodiment of Krillin that is the mirror of Master Roshi, right?
Her body is good and stacked. This is the Japanese.
Yes, this is the
That's
Japanese version. Good and stacked. And
I just love Roshi in this one. He's like hunched over, fucking scrunging under his beard.
oh yeah, he's scrunging hard. And so he asks her if she'll stay, and she, of course, has no choice because she is on the run. And so Master Roshi is overjoyed that she'll stay, not for the reasons he thinks, but it happens to be a symbiotic relationship either way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that in the Japanese, he says live a quiet life here for a while, right? In the English, he says take him a romantic stroll around the island, which doesn't make any sense because they never actually do that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that little thing out. He does ask her to just stick around for a while, right?
Yeah, it was just like, oh, well, great. That worked out.
But it worked out because it is what Launch needs, is a place to stay where she can be safe and kind of sort out her time in the desert, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's so happy because, finally Roshi has a feminine spirit in his life. Something that he's been seriously lacking as a spiritual father, especially one that's separated from society, exiled as he is.
Right. So very similar to how it is whenever Bulma arrives at Oolong's camper. Now that Launch has arrived here, Roshi's got an outfit for her.
Only Roshi's a little more subtle on how he tricks her into wearing it, right? He has everyone wear it. He's
well, this is
definitely
Roshi's version of the bunny
deceitful.
suit, right?
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
He just watches workout videos and stuff, and he's like, okay, here's, I mean, essentially something that you could work out in, sort of, and it's like a swimsuit frilly sort of thing that,
well,
you know,
right,
that
and
he
we're
would
gonna
see on his TV.
Yeah, we're gonna see it, but I wanted to put this particular thing, how he is going through all the trouble. It's almost a bit, but there's a little bit more to it. There's a little bit more meaning behind it, because his initial reaction is to try and take advantage. And the way that Launch reacts is the last passing of the last test. Because let's say this happened and nothing bad happened. I don't know that would be the proper person to go train with them, because they're not even where they're supposed to train yet.
It's like, yeah, I need a woman around here that is able to stand up to this. To be a representation for them of what they should find respectable in a mother.
It's interesting because it's almost like he is somewhat ironically channeling the spirit of Turtle by doing this.
Well, we're at Kame House.
It's true. So she's about to just get changed right there, and Krillin says something, and that's another. It's actually a mirror, because Roshi just expounds on that spirit of Turtle. Krillin does the same thing. He has to speak his conscience, right? There's a line of decency which he won't even cross. And that's what kind of redeems Krillin a little bit in this episode.
Well, I do have a note from this scene specifically, and it's that, you've got the shame analog of revealing yourself, right? Like becoming naked in front of someone being the analog for revealing your vulnerability. But you see, the way that Launch is, she can ride the Nimbus, right? In the same way that Goku is. She doesn't have that shame, right? And so as I was watching this, my note was, angels float because they take themselves lightly.
Right. And
look at this angel.
Launch is angelic. She takes herself lightly. She's the angelic mother, the innocent mother figure.
Exactly.
This is what I was talking about. So the blindness being totally absolved in something purely lustful, right? Purely sinful. It's blinded him to what actually is in front of him, let's say. But by the same token, his vice has led him, and this happens periodically, that his vice leads him to what actually should happen. And what should happen here is
he has manifested something that the boys need to see.
Right. And that is Launch standing up for herself.
Yes.
The spirit of femininity being able to let's say counter something that is let's say not only unbeneficial, but something that Blue Launch wouldn't even understand because of her naivety. And so she sneezes, and this is what I was talking about. It's like the same exact
it's the same framing
thing. She turns into Blonde Launch. She's pretty upset, but she doesn't know where she is. She thinks she's in jail, but it's just something that needs to be shown, and it's the last test. Like Brok and I have been saying, she challenges their mode of being, easily dispatches them, and forces them to respect Blonde Launch's mode of being as well as Launch as a whole. It kind of rounds out everything she needs to do to have her introduction and for them to then go train. Every time I sneeze, it seems I switch personalities, right?
Right. Now, I think this is a good time to tie into an idea that I have, because this being something that the boys need to witness being manifest by Roshi, right, and his actions, and this being at the Kame House, more and more it's becoming obvious to me that the reason that Kame House is pink is that it's like a brain. This is sort of, you think about the situation, the meta situation that's going on here, right? It's the brain out here in the unconscious where Roshi is. And so Goku being in this situation, he is witnessing, and Krillin too, they're witnessing the actions of femininity expressed in this way and in this way, and this is this limit here. They're putting together this image of what that influence is going to be. And you know, flash back to like Roshi being in the house, peeking out at launch, and then projecting out of the house, right? So this is the meta story of them constructing the image and also being informed as of the meaning of what a maternal figure will be, and it's taken up residence in that brain now to help develop them.
I see what you mean in a very loose way as far as brain, but because I mean, like Kame House can move and things like that.
Right. Kame House is sort of that voice of God there, and this idea that is coming through is like the voice of God is within you, and the betterment of the self is tied into following the will of that God, right? Which is why Goku's here.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how Kame House is the brain in which that's happening, though. Is it not indicative of Roshi's brain, though?
Yeah, I think it's as an image just displayed that way, and I think that this can be a bigger discussion at a different time, but it's represented that way because it tends to represent that for characters. The more that I think back as to where it is, it represents this space where they're internally working on their character, right? And what it means for characters to come learn from Roshi here, you know, in the space that Kame House is.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. I'm not sure I fully understand why it's a brain.
Sure.
Anyway, so, right, we do see that. Still trying to think about it.
Yeah, it's a weird analogy that I've just started putting together in my head, but it makes a certain type of sense with it being out here in the water in the unconscious. It's like, you know,
I see it as more of it's more of that domain. It's more of that, let's say, the light side of the domain of the path, because it can move and because it's kind of always here for our heroes until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that white path in the Tao, where if you need to have a step in the orderly, what you know, you're always able to have that while expanding into the unconscious and the chaotic. And I think that's kind of why it's around.
Right, like Roshi's Island is the dot out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, okay. I think we're on the same page there. We just we'll hash that out more. Anyways, so yeah, last thing we see here really is Launch as explanation of her manifestation of survival, that being blonde Launch.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the last slide we had, because the next one is going to be
next
time. So, to wrap things up with Launch, we're going to talk about her more as things go on, but obviously her introduction, she is, and I'll go back here for this, she is representative of both the ideal maternal and the adversarial feminine, and that kind of spectrum of the good feminine, because Blanche is never really she never really turns into the tyrannical mother or the mother of dragons, the Tiamat embodiment.
This is more of a manifestation of the self-preservation, right?
And it goes all the way to the end, and that blonde Launch is really at the border of when the spirit of the feminine transcends to the negative from the positive, whereas blue Launch is all the way really on that other side, where she takes herself lightly. She is angelic in her nature, right? She's forgiving and kind and peaceful, right? All that stuff,
right?
And that's really what Launch is, and that's why she's needed, because the boys need to understand what is good about the feminine, and that's why this show is not a patriarchal anti-woman show.
Like if you have this image in your head of all the media I watched just portrayed women as terrible, and you watched any Dragon Ball whenever you were younger, just get that out of your head
You
because
just don't
Dragon Ball
understand
was
it,
a
yeah.
positive representation of femininity.
Oh yeah,
You had it. Like, it was there.
definitely. All right, well, next episode we are going to talk about the confrontation and the actual physical confrontation between the spirit of Goku and the spirit of Krillin as they go head to head and find that stone.
Find that stone.
Anything you want to say about that real quick?
No, I just I think we can talk about that whenever we get to it.
Great.
'Cause this
Well,
is a deep one.
it is a deep one. There's a lot of symbology there, but I love this picture here because it's so indicative of the dominance that Goku could possibly show if he chose to.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that because that's part of his mode of being. So, if you liked what you saw, please subscribe, like this video, ring the bell for notifications, all that bureaucratic nightmare things. Just do all that stuff. I'm the host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And we hope you enjoyed what you saw. We'll see you guys next time.